I never imagined my baby shower would end with silence, so sharp it felt like glass shattering around me. All eyes were on me, but not for the reasons I had hoped. I sat there, 8 months pregnant, the fabric of my peach maternity dress clinging to my belly, hands resting protectively on the life growing inside me. The room, once filled with laughter and pastel balloons, now held its breath. My sister, Lila, stood across from me, smirking, her perfectly manicured hand resting on the handle of a battered, rust-stained stroller. "It fits her life," she said with a dry laugh. "Alone and falling apart." For a second, I didn't process the words. I blinked, forcing a tight smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, hoping desperately that I'd misunderstood. But then I heard it, my mother's voice, soft but cutting. "She's lucky she even got invited." She didn't say it like a joke. No trace of humor, no wink, just fact. A cold confirmation of something I'd always feared she believed. I felt my breath catch. My heart began to race, thudding loudly in my chest, as if it wanted to escape. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed down my dress, trying to appear calm, composed. I could feel the weight of the guests' stares pressing down on me like a spotlight. I never asked for it. I didn't look at Lila, my sister. I couldn't. But I saw her from the corner of my eye, her mouth curled into that familiar, satisfied smirk she always wore when she thought she'd won. Daniel, my husband, sat quietly beside me. He didn't move, not yet, but I felt his fingers lightly graze mine under the table, a silent question. "Are you okay?" I wanted to scream, to stand up and yell at both of them, ask why they were always so cruel, even now. But my throat felt tight, like something was wrapped around it, squeezing. I couldn't get the words out. Why did her words still hurt me after everything I'd been through? Why did I still crave their approval? Was I still the same girl I used to be, desperate, invisible? Never enough. The air in the room turned heavy. I could hear someone coughing awkwardly near the snack table. A guest dropped a plastic fork. No one laughed this time, not even the polite kind. Just silence. I looked at the stroller. One wheel bent inward, the fabric torn at the edge. A faint, sour smell of dust and old plastic clung to it. It looked like it had been pulled out of someone's basement, abandoned, forgotten. Just like me did I tried to speak, but the words didn't come. I only nodded, as if this was all perfectly normal, being insulted by your own family at a celebration meant for you. My cheeks burned, and not from the pregnancy glow people always talked about. Daniel finally stood, slow, calm, the way he always did when he was thinking 10 steps ahead. He walked over to the stroller, crouched beside it, and started inspecting it with quiet interest. My mother tilted her head. "It's the thought that counts," she said, as if Lila's words hadn't just sliced me open in front of everyone. Daniel didn't respond. He just looked at me, his eyes steady. There was something about his gaze, a spark, a quiet reassurance. And then he whispered, so low no one else could hear it. "Just wait." I didn't know what he meant, but somehow his voice was the only thing that kept me from falling apart right then. Because something was coming. Something none of them saw coming. If you had asked me a year ago what my baby shower would be like, I'd have told you about laughter, fresh flowers, and people who were proud of me, proud of us. Instead, I got Lila's smirk and a stroller that looked like it had survived a hurricane. But before all that, before the insult and the silence, I was actually excited. Nervous, sure, but excited. The morning of the shower, I remember standing in the living room, adjusting the placement of the cupcakes I'd spent all night decorating, vanilla, strawberry-filled, with pastel pink and yellow frosting. I even tied tiny little gold bows around each serving spoon, just to make it feel special. The whole house smelled like cinnamon and frosting, and soft acoustic music floated through the speakers. For once, I let myself believe it could be a good day. Daniel walked in, holding a balloon bouquet shaped like a giraffe. He kissed my forehead and said, "It's perfect, Abigail." I smiled, but there was that flutter in my stomach, not the baby kind, but the kind that warned me something might go wrong. I blamed it on hormones. I'd invited everyone, even the ones I wasn't sure I should. Lila, my mother, Margaret, my Uncle George, who'd probably drink too much and bring up politics. But I invited them all anyway because I thought maybe this would be the moment things changed. Maybe they'd see me differently now, not as the quiet, awkward second daughter, not the one who always needed help or guidance, but as a mother, someone who'd grown up, someone worth showing up for. I had tried so hard for this baby. Years of doctor visits, hormones that made me cry at laundry commercials, surgeries, prayer, disappointment. And then out of nowhere, this little miracle. When I found out I was pregnant, the first person I told after Daniel was Margaret. I thought maybe, just maybe, the news would spark something in her. But her response was, "Are you sure it's a good idea right now?" Right now, as if timing had anything to do with it after everything we'd been through. Still, I didn't let it crush me. I sent invites. I planned everything myself. Daniel helped, of course, but I insisted because I wanted to be the one to make it beautiful, to prove I could. And honestly, the day was beautiful, for the first hour or so. Friends from work showed up with gifts and hugs. My neighbor brought a crocheted blanket she made herself. There was laughter, stories, people rubbing my belly like I was some kind of magic lamp. It was almost perfect, until they arrived. Lila walked in first, 20 minutes late, wearing heels that clicked against the hardwood like a warning shot. Her lipstick was perfect, dress designer, and her energy like she'd just stepped off a runway and into my small, warm bubble. Margaret followed behind her, clutching a store-bought fruit tray like it was a last-minute obligation. They didn't hug me, just nodded, said hi. Still, I smiled. I told myself it was fine, that they came at all was something. But when Lila walked over and dropped that stroller in front of me, everything shifted. Even before she opened her mouth, I knew something was off. The energy changed. I felt it in my chest, tight, anxious. That's the thing about family. You can spend your whole life hoping they'll see you, that this time they'll finally say, "We're proud of you." But sometimes, they just come to remind you they never will. And yet, I still tried. I still wanted the day to be good. I had no idea how wrong I was, or how much everything was about to change. I stared at the stroller Lila had just dropped in front of me like a bad punchline no one asked for. It creaked slightly as it settled on the hardwood floor, one wheel tilted at an odd angle, a chunk of plastic missing from the tray. The once gray fabric was now more of a yellowed beige, stained in the corners like someone had spilled juice on it and never cleaned it up. It looked like it belonged on the curb with a free sign taped to it. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could, Lila tilted her head and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "It fits her life. Alone and falling apart." The words hit me like a slap. A few people gasped. Some awkwardly laughed, probably unsure if it was supposed to be a joke. But I knew her tone. That wasn't a joke. That was a weapon. And then, as if on cue, my mother added her own twist of the knife. "She's lucky. She even got invited." It was so casual, so dismissive, like I was some distant cousin who barely made the guest list instead of her daughter, carrying her first grandchild. The room went silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the baby playlist still playing in the background, something upbeat and sugary that now felt completely out of place. I swallowed hard. My fingers dug into the armrest of the chair as I forced my shoulders to stay still. My chest felt tight, like my lungs couldn't fully expand. "Don't cry. Not here. Not in front of them." I looked at Daniel. He was sitting just beside me, but he felt like the only real, solid thing in the room. His jaw was clenched, eyes fixed on Lila, then on the stroller. He didn't say a word, not yet, but his silence wasn't the kind that meant fear. It was the kind that meant calculation. And I knew that look, still. I couldn't stop the flood inside me.
Why?
Why was I still letting them do this to me? Why was I hoping for warmth when I knew they only came with cold? Lila had always been the star, the achiever, the golden one. Her house looked like a catalog, her kids wore matching monogrammed outfits, and her Christmas cards arrived in the mail with gold foil embossing and flawless smiles.
Me?
I was always the one who struggled, the one who needed help. And when I got pregnant, finally, miraculously, I thought maybe this was the moment they'd see me, not as the girl who always fell behind, but as someone worthy of standing beside. Instead, They brought a stroller from a junkyard and jokes wrapped in poison. Someone near the kitchen whispered, "That's kinda messed up," but no one said it loud enough to matter. The weight of that room. It was unbearable. And yet I stayed sitting. I didn't stand up. I didn't scream. I didn't defend myself. I wanted to. God, I wanted to yell, "Get out, both of you." But the words caught in my throat. I just nodded, just smiled, just pretended this was fine. Because that's what I'd been trained to do. To smile while bleeding. Daniel leaned in and gently touched my hand, his thumb moving in small circles over mine. Our silent language. Then he stood up, calm, steady, and walked over to the stroller like it was something worth inspecting. Margaret rolled her eyes. "It's the thought that counts," she muttered. But Daniel didn't look at her. He crouched down, hands brushing the handle, tracing the frame like he knew something no one else did. I caught his eye, and for a moment everything stopped. Then he whispered, just for me to hear, "Just wait." And that's when I felt it. This wasn't over. Not even close did I watch Daniel crouch in front of the stroller like he was examining a museum piece. Calm. Focused. His fingers moved over the warped frame and tattered fabric with a surgeon's kind of care. And somehow that simple act, him kneeling like that, quieted the storm in my chest, just a little. I could still feel my mother's disapproval radiating from across the room like heat. Lila was smirking again, arms folded, clearly proud of herself. The same way she used to smile when she'd hide my favorite sweater in high school or when she told my prom date I wasn't that pretty in real life. Only this time, she did it in front of 20 people, and I was supposed to smile through it like a good little sister. But I didn't move. I just watched Daniel trying to make sense of what he was doing. He wasn't inspecting it like it was broken, no. He looked deliberate, intentional. Then he glanced up at me, and that quiet confidence in his eyes made something stir in my gut. He leaned in and whispered, "Just wait." I couldn't speak. My throat was still tight, but I nodded, barely. Daniel turned to Lila and said, in the calmest, most polite tone I'd ever heard, "This was really thoughtful, Lila." She blinked, thrown off by his sincerity. "I mean, it's a bit rough around the edges," he added, brushing dust off the handlebar, "but I love that you saw something useful in it. That says a lot." Lila narrowed her eyes, confused. "It's a stroller, Daniel. I didn't hand you a metaphor." He smiled just slightly. "No, of course not." I could see her discomfort rising. She wasn't used to him playing her game. She was used to being the one holding the match, not watching someone else light it first. Daniel pushed the stroller forward an inch, then quietly reached beneath the handlebar. His hand slid into a space no one else had noticed, there between the frame and the base. He pressed something small, something hidden. Click. It was so subtle most people probably missed it. But I didn't. I saw his fingers move, saw the way his shoulders tensed for just a second, then relaxed. Then he stood, brushing off his jeans, and casually returned to his spot beside me like nothing had happened at all. Lila looked annoyed now. "Well, I figured it was better than nothing. God knows you probably didn't have the budget for anything nicer." Margaret chuckled under her breath. "It's the thought that counts," she repeated, like it was some family motto. I sat still, my spine straightened just slightly. I could feel the tiniest shift in my posture, like I was reclaiming space in my own body, in my own home. I looked around the room at the people watching, all of them frozen in the awkwardness, unsure of whether to intervene or pretend it hadn't happened. Then I took a breath. I smiled. Not the forced kind I'd worn earlier. This one felt quieter, firmer. "Thanks, Lila," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Really? It does fit my life." She raised an eyebrow, clearly waiting for sarcasm. I let the silence stretch before I added, "Surprisingly resilient, full of hidden strength." Daniel's fingers brushed mine again under the table. I didn't have to look at him to know he was smiling. Something in the air shifted. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing. The moment she'd thought would humiliate me, she'd just handed me a match, and Daniel had already lit the fuse. The stroller sat there like a loaded question. Everyone in the room could feel it. Something was off, but no one knew exactly what. Guests shifted in their seats, murmuring softly to each other, stealing glances between Daniel, the stroller, and me. Lila's arms were still crossed, but her smirk had started to slip. Just a little. My mother was unusually quiet, sipping from her glass of lemonade like it might help her swallow the tension. And then it happened. The stroller jolted, just slightly, then let out a soft, mechanical whir. Every head turned toward it. A narrow seam on the side of the frame began to open, like a hidden panel sliding away to reveal something inside. Lights blinked softly beneath the fabric, gentle, pastel hues that pulsed like a heartbeat. The bent wool straightened. The sunshade lifted itself with a smooth, hydraulic motion, revealing a cushioned interior that looked more like a luxury car seat than anything baby-related. A soft, melodic voice chimed from a tiny speaker under the handlebar. "Welcome, baby Noah." The room gasped. Even I gasped because I had no idea Daniel had done this. The broken stroller wasn't broken at all. It was a disguise, a clever, layered shell, and beneath it was something beautiful, custom-built, thoughtful, and completely opposite of what Lila thought she was handing me. Lila's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked stunned, confused, like she'd just stepped into a trap she didn't know she was walking into. Daniel stood and casually walked back over to the stroller, tapping another small button. The wheels rotated into a self-balancing lock. A touch screen lit up on the handlebar, displaying temperature controls, a built-in monitor, and a small voice recording feature. He looked at the guests and said, "It's something I've been working on with a friend from my engineering program. Was going to surprise Abigail next week, but I guess Lila helped me reveal it a little early." He glanced at her then, not angry, just amused. "It's built for durability, city terrain, safety, and yeah, it looks a little rough at first," he added, looking at the outer shell, "but sometimes the best things do." There was a pause, and then applause started, slowly, a few claps from the back of the room, then more. A couple of people laughed. Someone even said, "Wow, that's incredible." One guest whispered, "That's actually genius," loud enough for everyone to hear. I just sat there, stunned. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but not from shame this time, from awe, from gratitude, from something rising in my chest that felt like power. For the first time in a long time, I stood up, steadying myself with one hand on the chair, the other on my belly. I looked at Lila, who now seemed small. Her mouth was tight, her jaw clenched. And my mother. She was blinking, her lips parted like she wanted to say something but didn't know how to anymore. I walked over to the stroller, my stroller, and ran a hand across its smooth interior. The voice chimed again softly, "Hello, Mama." And I smiled. Then I looked at Lila. "Thanks for the gift," I said calmly. "You were right. It does fit my life." I paused, then finished, "Stronger than it looks, full of surprises, and definitely not falling apart." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes said everything: shock, confusion, and a flicker of something else: regret. Daniel came over, wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and kissed the top of my head. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. I felt whole. The guests began to drift toward the kitchen after that, some grabbing cupcakes, others starting conversations again, the mood noticeably lighter. The air felt less heavy, like a storm had passed and left everything washed clean. But I stood still for a moment, hand resting on the edge of the stroller, just breathing. I could still hear the soft echo of the voice, "Hello, Mama," replaying in my mind like a lullaby I didn't know I needed. My heart was full, overwhelmed and steady all at once. Lila didn't say anything else. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to explain. She just grabbed her purse, muttered something to Margaret, and walked out the door, heels tapping the floor like a retreating drumbeat. No goodbye, no congratulations. Margaret followed, more slowly. She lingered for a moment at the doorway, her lips pursed like she wanted to speak but didn't know how to speak to me anymore. Maybe because, for once, I wasn't sitting there waiting for her approval. I didn't look away. I held her gaze, not with anger, not with spite, but with something stronger: peace. She said nothing, then left. And just like that, they were gone. I sat back down beside Daniel, exhaling as I leaned into him. He pulled me in gently, pressing his lips against my temple, and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. Not just okay, changed. I looked down at my belly, at the soft curve that held my son Noah. His name meant rest, peace, and he had been just that from the moment I saw those two pink lines. He gave me something no one else had. He gave me reason that I had spent so much of my life bending myself into someone else's version of acceptable, trying to be the good daughter, the easy one, the quiet one. I'd smiled through insults. I'd laughed off cruelty. I'd mistaken survival for love. But that day, I realized something. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strength. Sometimes it's the space where your power grows quietly, waiting for the moment to speak louder than words ever could. Daniel didn't fight my battles for me. He just reminded me I wasn't alone in them. That matters. That changes everything. As the sun began to dip through the windows, casting warm gold across the nursery corner, I walked back over to the stroller. It stood there, quietly, as if proud of what it had just revealed. I reached into the pocket where Daniel had hidden the activation switch. Inside was a note, folded small. It read, "For you, Abigail. For every time they made you feel like less, this is to remind you you've always been more." Tears fell freely then, but not from pain, from healing. That night, long after the last guest left and the wrapping paper had been tossed in a bag, Daniel and I sat on the couch, lights dim, my head on his shoulder. We didn't talk about Lila or Margaret or what the guests would say. We talked about Noah, about midnight feedings, stroller walks, and lullabies we hadn't picked yet. We talked about our future, one that didn't revolve around trying to fix the past. And I made myself a promise. My son will never grow up in a home where love feels like a competition. He'll know his worth, not because he earns it, but because he exists. That's the difference. That's the legacy I choose. To anyone out there who feels like the background character in their own story, waiting for someone to finally notice them, don't wait. You don't need permission to take up space. You don't need their validation to know you belong. You already do. And sometimes, all it takes is one push of a hidden button to reveal just how much light you've had inside you all along. Oh yeah, that was my baby shower. Not exactly the fairy tale I pictured, but in a strange way, it turned out to be everything I needed. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family or had to find your strength in silence, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me your story. You're not alone. If you felt something while watching this, if it made you pause or think or just feel a little less invisible, please hit that like button. It really helps more people find this video and this message. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Maybe they're waiting for their own hidden button moment too. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more real stories, more heart, and more moments that remind us we're all doing our best out here. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and most of all, thanks for staying. I see you.